Yes, hello. It's Jason Louv, and this is the Ultra Culture Podcast. And we have extended the Black Friday sale for Cyber Monday. We've got deals going on pretty much everything at Magic.me, as well as Bitcoin Insider. However, you need to act fast because although you probably saw a Cyber Monday extension coming, this is absolutely the last call. We're going to be raising our prices site-wide very soon, which means that this is the last time that you will ever get prices this low. And not only that, but if you get subscriptions at the current prices, you will be grandfathered in at those prices forever, even if we raise prices, assuming that you stay subscribed. To get the sales, you can just check at the top of magic.me, www.magic.me. I've listed them all there for you, including the deal for Bitcoin Insider, along with the timer countdown till when they expire, which is midnight, Monday, Pacific Standard Time, Cyber Monday 2021. Here's what we're offering. You can get a monthly subscription to the Magic.me core curriculum for 30% off the first month. That gives you access to literally all of our core level classes, which is over 15 at this point, on everything from Chaos Magic to Meditation to Tarot. You can get $100 off either of our signature mega courses. That's the Adept Initiative and the Alchemy of Chaos, which are our epic mega trainings that will take you all the way from 0 to 60 and work together as a 1-2 punch to get you fully operational and in full control of your reality as fast as possible. Or if you want to be one of the rare few that truly commit to pushing your training to the absolute limit, if you want to grab life by the horns right now and get everything you possibly can out of it, you can take $300 off the complete Magic.me intensives, which is the already discounted bundle that includes the Adept Initiative, the Alchemy of Chaos, and the Fortuna Working. That's everything you need to 100% absolutely master your entire existence, spiritually, materially, and financially. Also, P.S., you can also take $100 off Bitcoin Insider, Magic.me's sister course, which is my masterclass training in Bitcoin, blockchain, and cryptocurrency. And the deal for that is also listed at the top of Magic.me. So those are the deals, and you have this final grace period to get them, but the clock is ticking. You have until end of day Monday. And of course, as with everything I offer, after you jump into the courses, if for any reason you decide it's not for you, that's absolutely fine. You can just contact us within the terms clearly listed on the course you pick up, and we will refund 100% of your money, 100%. You have literally nothing to lose. So if you're on the fence, here's my best advice to you. Just do it. If you're listening to this right now, if you're a fan of this podcast, you're ready. Grab the courses you want while they're still on sale so that you lock in the deal. And if you decide later that they're not for you, that's perfectly fine. Of course, I'm this confident in offering this guarantee because I know for a fact that you are going to be very, very happy with the courses at Magic.me. Nobody ever takes me up on the refund. So act now. Grab the deals because after Cyber Monday's over, you are never going to get these prices again. So go for it now while you still can, and I will see you in class. Okay, and on that note, we have an excellent podcast for you on the philosophy of the Kabbalah. I'm talking with a student about disentangling what the Kabbalah means, what it's used for, why it's useful, and generally cutting through the confusion to see the clarity of why this is such a potent tool for understanding life, let alone for Western mysticism in general. The Kabbalah, which is an originally Jewish system for analyzing levels of reality as it manifests, has been of tremendous importance to European intellectual history. Students of Western mysticism have been puzzling over it for centuries, often doing little more than confusing themselves. I tend to think about it as almost like computer code for reality, or even more specifically, as the branch of mathematics that is concerned with symbolism and meaning, which sounds like a tall claim, but makes actually quite a lot of sense the more you get into it. However, when students don't really understand what they're looking at, this often leads them to abandon Kabbalah altogether and loudly proclaim themselves superior to it, or even that it is unnecessary for magic. We've probably all met people like this or been that person. However, as we're going to see in this podcast, that's a huge, huge mistake. When properly understood, Kabbalah does not make magic more complex. It's actually a tremendously useful tool for making things much, much more simple. So to dig in further on that, just to preface this podcast, I'm going to read the section from my book, John Dee and the Empire of Angels, about Kabbalah, which is, I think, probably the most concisely I've ever explained the topic. If you haven't yet read John Dee and the Empire of Angels, which is my book on kind of the entire history of Western magic, it's still chugging along. You can still get it on Amazon. It will never go out of style. It is the best book I've ever written and analyzes not only John Dee and the Enochian system, but actually the entire history of the progression of Western thought and politics for the last 1,000 years. Highly recommended. Okay, this is from chapter 5, which is specifically about Kabbalah and Neoplatonism, which is called Ladder of Spheres. In this section, I'm talking about Kabbalah within the context of John Dee's interest in it in the Renaissance, but it is, so there's a few references to Dee here, but it's about Kabbalah in general. Okay. To the study of Hermeticism and Neoplatonism, Dee had now added that of the Kabbalah, which builds on Neoplatonism's pure philosophy to provide a working system of categorizing and sorting the universe into a cohesive whole. Broadly speaking, Kabbalah is the branch of mathematics that is concerned with studying the mind of God. Originally a rabbinical tool of scriptural interpretation, it was synthesized with Christianity, Hermeticism, and Renaissance Neoplatonism in the 15th century by Giovanni Pico della Mirandola. Mercifully, it is the structure that brings order to this ideological stack and draws it together into a cohesive and elegant pattern. While Hermeticism posits the interconnection of all things in the universe, the Kabbalah shows what the connections actually are and forms a metaphorical map of the cosmos. The system postulates 10 spheres, or Sephiroth, that make up the energetic circuit of creation, beginning with Godhead and terminating in manifest reality. This map demonstrates how reality comes into being, starting from the void, progressing through the mind of God, into causal blueprints carried out by angels, through the astral world of dreams and emotions, and then into the physical world. Likewise, it shows how everything that has already been manifested interlinks and connects into a cohesive whole. As a more sophisticated version of the Great Chain of Being, it shows how to reascend the ladder back to God, and for the mens adeptus, suggests how to participate in the patterning and continual manifestation of the universe. Brief summations of the 10 spheres in modern terms are as follows. 1. Kether, crown, Godhead, the spark of creation or Big Bang. 2. Hokmah, wisdom, positive, masculine, the stars and zodiac. 3. Bina, understanding, negative, feminine, Saturn. 4. Hesed, glory, structure, Jupiter. 5. Geburah, power, separation, Mars. 6. Tefereth, beauty, divinity as manifest in humanity, the Sun. 7. Netzach, victory, emotion, Venus. 8. Hod, splendor, intellect, Mercury. 9. Yesod, foundation, sex, dreams, life energy, the astral plane, the moon. 10. Malkuth, kingdom, the physical world, Earth. To these are added 0, Ein Sof, the void, as well as a theoretical sphere, Doth, knowledge, which corresponds to the separation between spheres 1 through 3 and 7 through 10, the abyss between unmanifest and manifest existence, noumenon and phenomenon. The abyss also represents the utmost limit of the rational mind, beyond which it cannot pass. The Sephiroth are not a literal map of reality. Rather, they are a map of mankind's capacity for creating meaning, which shows that the entirety of human thought can be condensed into the numbers 0 through 10. These 10 spheres are connected by 22 paths, each of which blends the 2 spheres it connects, and they are assigned to the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, meaning that the structure of the Kabbalah is an outgrowth of the Hebrew language itself. This forms a pattern referred to as the Tree of Life, and raises its total number of spheres and paths to 32. In addition to the Hebrew alphabet, these spheres and paths were assigned to combinations of the 4 classical elements, 7 classical planets, and 12 zodiacal signs. In addition to the Hebrew alphabet, these spheres and paths were assigned to combinations of the 4 classical elements, 7 classical planets, and 12 zodiacal signs. To these paths, it was thought, could be attributed the totality of human knowledge, as well as the totality of the aspects of the physical universe, a Renaissance prototype of a neural net. As such, the Kabbalah forms a cohesive map of the human mind, and as mankind was thought to be made in God's image, therefore infers a map of the mind of God. By the analogical thinking of operative magic, in which like is connected to like, this map could also suggest pathways by which an individual could influence anything in the universe. Much as the Great Chain of Being does, this version of the Kabbalah suggests that most humans are following a downward trend of manifestation, proceeding from God into the gross materiality of the physical world. An intrepid initiate, however, could reverse this course, reascending Jacob's ladder back to their source and thereby restoring their original divine nature. The Hermetic Kabbalah thus formed the ground plan for undertaking this inner adventure and completing the great work. In addition to the map of the Tree of Life, the Kabbalah incorporates the processes of gematria, or adding up the numerical values associated with the Hebrew alphabet to discover hidden meanings and analogies in Scripture. For the working Kabbalist, this process is extended beyond the written word and into the whole of nature. Kabbalah has a tendency to terrify with its complexity, but is simple in practice. In fact, people in Western societies have been immersed in it their entire lives, as its association chains are hardwired into Western civilization. As an example, consider the sphere Netzach, symbolizing love, to which corresponds the planet Venus, roses, copper, the goddess Aphrodite, the virtue of unselfishness, and so on. This cluster of association should make perfect sense for Westerners as all relating to each other and to the concept of love. This is Kabbalah, understanding and categorizing nature as a language of correspondences. Now, to extend this further and begin to think like an operative magician, consider the quote-unquote magical operation of using these Kabbalistic correspondences to create a talisman to win or reinforce the love of a sweetheart. Give her 7 roses, not too few, not too many, a copper locket, and a card with a poem written to her as if she were the goddess Aphrodite, and see what magical effect this has. Of course, you may say that there's no value in such objects and ritual gestures, and it's the thought that counts, but see how far that gets you. The analogical and associative meaning building of the Kabbalah can seem daunting and even opaque to non-initiates, like somebody looking into a manual on advanced computer programming or differential calculus for the first time. Yet as with these arts, the processes of Kabbalah were created in order to do complex things more easily. Once the initial learning curve is passed, Kabbalah allows for complex association chains that decrease the overall mental operations needed to work out any given problem. A student of Kabbalah will seek to relate everything in their life to the tree, until the whole of existence changes from a chaos of noise and information into a perfectly organized filing cabinet. From here, the mental silence of meditation becomes easier, and the mind becomes still enough to receive wisdom from that silence. This method of jnana yoga is not for everybody. Spiritual adherents with more physical or emotional temperaments will gravitate toward hatha yoga, physical postures, or bhakti yoga, and prayer. But for compulsive intellectuals, it can be a blessing, as it is meant to overload the rational mind with divine semiotics until the discursive mind finally breaks and lets go, allowing merciful moments of transcendence from the reasoning faculty, or ruach. One soon sees the connections between literally everything in nature. Every number, word, color, God form, personal interaction, mode of consciousness, and even thought collapses into a shining whole, revealing that the totality of the universe is connected and is itself the mind of God in the process of manifesting itself. It is from this process that we get the step-down occult artifacts of numerology, tarot, color symbolism, and all the rest. Yet what were analogical tools in the Enlightenment machine of initiates become gaudy fortune-telling devices in the superstitious hands of the unawakened. So there you have it. Again, that's from John Dee and the Empire of Angels, my book, which is on Amazon and is awesome. So, with that said, if you've ever puzzled over what exactly Kabbalah is or why its study is necessary to magic, you're going to really, really enjoy this podcast. All right, enjoy the show. Make sure to grab the Cyber Monday deals while you still can, and I will see you in class.
I just had one quick question. I almost kind of feel silly asking it because I'm not sure it's something you can even answer. But there's this being that's referenced very infrequently across the literature, the Cosmic Lion. And
Cosmic Lion?
Yeah, the Cosmic Lion.
Was in what literature?
It's referenced very, very seldomly, very sporadically. Holy Daemon. It's mentioned in that book.
What is Holy Daemon?
Holy Daemon. Who wrote it? Prater Archer.
I don't know who that is.
Yeah. And it's mentioned in a few other places. This was the actual being that I had a fairly significant vision of. And so I was wondering if, in all of your sort of, journeys across the literature, if you had come across any mentions of the Cosmic Lion. If you'd like do a Google search for it and you see some images, close, it's clear that this is the image of the Cosmic Lion is sort of in human consciousness. It's something that emerges. But beyond, people would maybe recall the Lion of Judah. But what I encountered was something that wasn't necessarily tied to any human culture or anything of that sort. Some, a being that is literally made of light and composed of stars. So I was just curious if you had ever come across anything like that, or
it's very simple. I mean, at least from what you're describing, and this is possibly not the exact answer, but it's Leo, right? It's Leo in the zodiac.
All right.
Right there. So it's a lion made of stars of light is the Leo section of the night sky.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I'm a Leo, so maybe that would make a little bit more sense. There's
a lot of other stuff that it relates to. It's often used as a symbol for Christ and the Lion of Judah, all that. And there are Gnostic elements to the lion as well. Crowley talks about it.
I was only bringing up because after having had this extraordinary, the kind of vision that brings you to your knees weeping,
What prompted this?
This was years ago. And for the most part, I truly believe that a lot of the work is letting these things go. And, but this was the one that was just so incredible. And it was noetic in nature. And I know that the answer, any questions that I have about it are fundamentally within. I guess sometimes, when you start hitting on some of this stuff, it can always be helpful to, interact with another flesh and blood human being face to face, right? So I was just curious if that was something that you would ever come across, personally in your subjective experience or read about it. It seemed like when I was doing my research, outside of the Lion of Judah, right? Which is a very, I grew up Protestant, and the Lion of Judah is a very frequently used metaphor. Besides that, in other literature, you come across a lot of similar themes, a lot of similar stuff, but it seems to me as if this Cosmic Lion is very rarely like elaborated on, as a being. And I mean, all the lion said to me was, you have to make a decision. It was more of a warning at the time than anything else.
About something specific?
Oh, I think, no, I was reaching the threshold, of life and death. Right. And if I continued along the path I was going down, I was risking madness, all of the usual stuff.
Okay.
At least this is my current level of understanding after, 2.5 years of integration work on this.
So the lion generally, okay, so a couple points. One is, when you encounter magical visions like this, you are always interacting with a level of yourself and a level of the universe, and ultimately they're kind of porous. Right.
Yeah, that was definitely the sense. There wasn't a whole lot of boundary. Like, I would be hard pressed to tell you whether or not this was something outside of myself. It appeared outside, but it appeared outside having come from within, that kind of deal.
Right. I mean, and that's how the magical experience is. So, but when you experience visions, they are not necessarily distinct entities or beings as much as symbolic representations of some form of the universe or yourself, or the universe and yourself communicating back to you through a symbolic form. And it works the same way as like with dream imagery, right? Where it's like, if you dream of flying, it really means having sex or something like that. It's like,
yeah. In
the case of magic, it's not that it means some Freudian thing. It tends to mean some part of the tree of life, right? So that means some mixture of elemental, planetary, or zodiacal, right? And as well as a path. And so basically, like, okay, so you mentioned that this is not elaborated on very, very often. I actually disagree. This is elaborated on all the time. It's the zodiacal sign of Leo, which underlies so much of everything, right? Leo also is both, it has the lion imagery as well as solar energy, which has some connotations, one of which is the ego, like the ego structure itself, not in a bad way necessarily, but in a very, like, the very valorous solar lion, roaring like a lion, all of that, it's like, yeah, letting your true self out, and so in the context that you mentioned it to me, it sounds somewhat like a warning from your own ego to yourself, right?
Wow.
Right? In a good way, right? But the lion represents the best part. It's Teferet, in a sense, like Teferet, although it's not I
was going to say, yeah, if I had to associate it with something, I would associate it with Teferet. The obvious association is with Leo. Given the fact that I am a Leo, it's unsurprising. I think astrology, of all of the, like, for some reason I have a much easier time accepting Kabbalah than astrology. And maybe that's just such a strong scientific disposition coming from before.
This, right? This is because this is a very confusing point for people. Astrology is part of Kabbalah, right? But when you look at all this, look at it like this, right? People obsess over astrology and numerology and things like this as if there's some type of predictive science. Which,
yeah, right.
And you're completely right. It's just like, come on, But the best way to look at it from a magical perspective is, so you have like an artist palette, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And you've got the elements, you've got the planets, you've got the zodiac, and these are like your palette for describing experiences, visions, energies, where most people just have good and bad. Where if you have the Kabbalah or you have a wider perspective, you have elements, planets, zodiac, and they all combine. And by the time you get to Enochian, which we were just talking about, Enochian is basically a finely great, like Kabbalah basically combines all of these. If you combine, and that's why, okay, so it's three, so it's, and these are embedded within the Hebrew alphabet, right? You've got the three mother letters for the elements combined are Earth. You get the 7 single letters for the, single or double. You get the 7 letters for the planets, and then the remaining 12 letters are the zodiac, making up 22 Hebrew letters. You combine those all in various patterns, and you get the tree of life. That's all the tree of life is an elaboration on that. Meaning, when you have experiences like this, if it's reflecting Leo to you, well, then you know it's perhaps working with, like, for instance, now, okay, Leo, all right, well, what path is associated with Leo? Turns out it's strength, right? Teth, the Hebrew letter Teth. Now, what is the image of the strength card?
The woman with the lion.
Right. Or in the Crowley deck, it's the woman riding the lion, which is the beast in Babylon.
Yeah.
Right. So, but he's accurate in that.
Yeah, I know he's accurate.
Because one represents sexual energy, right? Mm-hmm. And repressing it, and the other one means using it basically. So my broader point is, have you read Liber 777?
Yeah. I went through it, but not in enough detail. I haven't focused on a lot of the sort of magic fundamentals that I should probably focus on. I've been so focused on just straight meditate, just straight getting myself out of Chapel Perilous,
Yeah.
And, but now I guess, it probably, now that I'm hearing this from you, Jason, it's right, clicking and registering. And I think that you're dead on this.
Yeah. So the whole thing about 777, it's like you have a vision. It's like, okay, well, what is that? And you look at 777, and there's even a column for animals in which you could go and lion. Okay, well, lion is strength, and Leo and all. And then you immediately have all of the correspondences. And this turns out to be very, very useful for a lot of reasons. One is, once you actually memorize all this stuff and do it through path working, it decreases. You no longer have to keep track of it. It's like it's a filing cabinet, as Crowley puts it. All that shit is filed away. And then the minute you have a vision, you're like that, you're like, oh yeah, okay. And then also it becomes very, very useful, because if you do a ritual to do something specific, let's say you do a ritual to work with the energy of Leo, and mermaids show up. Well, you fucked up, right?
Yeah.
Right? Or you do a ritual for Leo and lion-like, at a very basic level, lion-like images appear, then you got it right. Otherwise, banish, start over. What did you fuck up in your banishing and invoking stack? So,
yeah, I guess, not to be, it's really hard to rub out the inner skeptic. The issue that I've always had with 777 is I've wondered, where exactly, like, from which ass were these correspondences pulled? Were they, like, who came up with them? What, are these just assumptions? Are they pulled from subjective experience? Where were these? It's obviously an amazing piece of art, but I'm just curious where, and I don't know if this was actually, now that you mention it, was one of my other questions for you a long time ago, was where were these correspondences even pulled from?
So the initial material is in the Sefer Yetzirah, which describes the whole structure of the thing, which is a very succinct book, which is the core book of Kabbalah, Jewish.
Yeah, I've scanned that one. But were all of those correspondences in 777 were pulled from the Sefer Yetzirah?
I'm getting to that. So that shows the basic structure. It was then elaborated upon by Eliphaz Levi in the 19th century, although he deliberately did not print the accurate information in Transcendental Meditation. It was all, and then all of that, the people that put it all together in its modern, the person that put it all together in its modern form was Mathers.
Yeah.
Golden Dawn, right? But it wasn't just, you have to realize that it wasn't just, okay, Mathers sat in the British Library for years and years and years, collating all of that stuff. But it wasn't just Mathers. A lot of that was done. I mean, a lot of what the Golden Dawn was doing, you just imagine they're just sitting there basically remote viewing all day long. So a lot of that stuff it basically all came from the Golden Dawn, but not all, but they unified everything that was there before. It all existed. Because when you look at 777, basically what you're looking at is the structure of the Kabbalah from Sefer Yetzirah with the tarot laid on top of it. And then Mathers went through and added the Egyptian gods and the classic mythology of Europe, to which Crowley added Hinduism and Buddhism, Crowley and Bennett. Extremely valuable. And further authors have elaborated on it further. The question is not, is it real or not? It's, is it helpful? And it turns out, despite the immense protestations of every magician I've ever spoken to, starting from when I was first getting started in magic in my late teens, they all resisted the Kabbalah. Oh, you don't need that. Well, you don't need to learn that. It's like, and the chaos magicians completely rejected it. And what they just end up reinventing it. Like Peter Carroll put out a book where he did like the Lovecraftian, like the new Kabbalah, and it's all H.P. Lovecraft gods.
Yeah, it's just like you just reinvent it or burn down your house, or, you know. Actually, now that you've put it into those terms, yeah, I think it's just the engineer in me wants everything to be accurate. And
well, that's the system for you.
Yeah.
If you're an engineer,
it's tough. It's tough to sort of straddle both of these worlds. But also, yeah, it makes perfect sense. It doesn't really matter, you know, reality, there's realities, and is it helpful is really the ultimate question.
It's extremely helpful. Think of it as just think of it as a cataloging system.
Okay.
Right. And but even Crowley says this, it's like, it's not useful. It's not valuable because there's like some eternal truth to it. It's valuable because it's fucking useful and it works. And honestly, it's basically what he says is the closest thing we have is the Abhidhamma in Tibetan Buddhism, which is just nobody uses, and it's much too complex. And if you're working Western magical systems, which by default you are if you grew up in a Western culture,
right?
And the other thing to remember, by the way, I point this out in the John Dee book, is all of those correspondences are hard cooked into you already, right? Because our culture uses them, right? They're hard baked into our culture. So here's an example, right? This is the example that I give in the book. It's like, okay, so if you think about doing something, if you think about giving somebody a Valentine's Day present, right? Then you would immediately think, okay, what you would think of, oh, roses, a poem declaring my love. I'm just being
hearts, chocolate.
Yeah, chocolate, like red, pink. The certain colors come to mind. All that shit is Netzach, right? That stuff is all, those correspondences are already cooked into the culture. Those are all Kabbalistic correspondences. And it's like, well, and what I say in the book is like, well, okay, well, you could say all that stuff is arbitrary and it doesn't really matter. And actually what matters is your intent, i.e. it's the thought that counts. Well, just try that on Valentine's Day and see how far that gets you.
Not very far.
Right. So, but my overall point is what we're discussing is, and this is my point about the artist palette. It's like what we're discussing is that what the Kabbalah is a system for filing subjective meaning, not some objectively true thing, right? It's a filing cabinet for subjective meaning in the same sense that like, so I'm learning music right now. It's like when you're learning music, like every time I go to obviously there's inner structure to music and it's unwavering.
Yeah. Right? No, it's absolute.
There's, all that stuff is unwavering. It's as unwavering as math. Right. But then it's like, every time I talk to a musician, they're like, oh, you don't need that. Just go with the flow, man. It's like, okay.
Yeah, well, it's easy to go with the flow, but they even forget that the flow's already baked within.
Right. And I'm also like, well, easy for you to say you went to school for music.
Yeah, right.
I didn't. I don't know any of this shit. So it's like, okay, well, and so there's a real, this is actually the key point. This is the key point because I was thinking about this last night. So a lot of you and probably a lot of people on this call know the thing about conscious and unconscious and conscious competence, right?
And it depends on how you're talking about it.
Okay, so this is an NLP concept. It's used in corporate trainings all over the world. When you're learning a new skill, there's 4 stages you go through, right? One is unconscious incompetence. right? Meaning you don't know what you're doing, but you don't know that you don't know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right, which is where beginner's luck comes from. Like somebody just sits down at something and they do something great because they don't know that they don't know. Right, so there's a certain beginner's luck factor or an idiot savant factor where somebody can just suddenly do something, but then they can't repeat it. They don't know what they did. If you ask them to do it again, they have no idea what they did, so they can't do it again. Right. And then they keep going thinking that they're really good at it and nothing works. And they're like, that's when they enter stage 2, conscious incompetence. Oh shit, I don't actually know what I'm doing. And then at that point, they start to actually learn how the skill works. And so over the course of a long period of time, depending on how hard they train, they go from conscious incompetence, meaning they know that they don't know what they're doing, to conscious competence, meaning now they know what they're doing and they can do it if they're paying full attention and focus to it. And they're going through all their heuristics and rules and everything, all their notes and they've written down, and it's very artificial and stilted at that point, but they know the steps and they know the order to do them in. Only at that point, when they go into unconscious competence, which is where somebody can just do it without thinking about it, but it's right. But here's the problem, right? This is what I realized last night, actually. Here's the problem that applies to magic and actually everything. People confuse unconscious incompetence and unconscious competence, right? So all these people come to magic and they say, well, all the great people, like they weren't, like they just did stuff and it seemed to work. Well, what they're forgetting is they went through this phase where they had to learn everything and then forget it. Like Austin Spare always used to say, I've forgotten more about magic, than anyone on earth, right? Something like that. So, but he wasn't doing anything Kabbalistic, but it's not like he went through the AA, it's like he was around Crowley, all that. So.
On a universal level, it's funny when you were saying that, it kind of mapped for me to the idea that, at first it's coincidence, and then it's synchronicity, and then it's skill.
And then it's just the way you live your life after the skill part.
Yeah, exactly. And then, you can just let go. It's funny, people will talk about wobi-sobi or, this idea or wu-wei, of just like letting go. There's nothing to be done and all that. And it's like, well, you got to learn to ride the bike first.
Right. Yeah. And so it's actually, it's like for me when I'm learning music and it's like, if people are saying like, oh yeah, just do whatever. It's like, I get frustrated. It's like so unhelpful. It's like, I can't, like, easy for you to say, right? Like that's where you're at now, but you can't tell a beginner that. Because the most obvious example is riding a bike. It's like once you know how to ride a bike, you never think about driving a car. Think about this, right? Do you drive?
Yeah.
Right. So like every time you get behind the wheel of a car, you are assuming there are almost infinite points between point A and B where you could destroy the existence of several people.
Right.
Children, women, it's like you're behind, but like how often do you actually think you're listening to the radio, you're thinking about something totally unconscious. It's like that a skill and think about how complex driving is. It's just totally on autopilot, right? But if you were to tell, if you're a driving instructor, you have a 16-year-old, it's like, are you going to tell them, oh, just go with the flow, it'll be fine?
No.
Right. So it kind of works like that. And so it's a long-winded way of saying that I guess what I'm really trying to express to you is that you can ask me and I can tell you the answer. But if you go through a period of learning 777 and doing the best way to do that, by the way, is to do path workings for each of the major tarot cards.
Okay.
And once you do that, it's all locked into place, and then you just know. It's just okay. Well,
yeah, I know. In those regards, I've been extraordinarily disciplined in other aspects, but in some of the laying down the foundational stuff, I found one way or the other to rationalize. Because you look at all those tables of correspondences, and you're like, I don't want to memorize that shit. But it's probably, if I really want to commit to this particular kind of work, that's probably necessary.
What I want to underline is that it seems like a lot of work, but it is immensely time-saving. Immensely. Like, I can't even, once you get that really embedded, and second nature, it's like you never have to think about that stuff again. And Crowley says in book 4, it's like it decreases. One of the reasons why it's important is because once you go through that, everything in your mind is ordered. It's like a filing cabinet. Everything pertains, and then you never have to think about that. And then your mind is more clear. It's you're taking a mess. It's like basically when you're coming into magic, it's like, okay, like you're looking at, what is this? You've got all the gods from all these different cultures. Like, what's the truth? Like, oh my God, like what, like Egyptian, Aztec, Sumerian, Christian, how does this all fit together? How can all these people have contradictory ideas? Oh my God.
Right.
What system is the right system? Where do I start? Like, what does this vision mean? What does it all mean? And what you're not really, like, once you go through that, you realize all of that can be reduced to 10 numbers. Like literally, like you can say 3 and it gives you, once you have that, you just say 3 and it has the immediate association chain of everything, the whole scale of color, the Bina, Saturn, Babylon, and Kali, the abyss, the city of the pyramids, the Magister Templi, on and on and on and on, goddess energy in general, like the dark goddess, all this stuff, right? And then it's just like, it becomes one. So instead of this mess, it becomes one association chain. And then it becomes
extraordinarily valuable.
Yeah.
I know now, I'm seeing it now, how valuable, especially with some of the shit that I've dealt with, trying to piece fragments together when shit's just going nuts, to have those association chains in place for the purpose of reality map making. Okay, I get it now.
And at that point, once you're there, yes, okay, there are all these truisms about, the map is not the territory and all this. Okay, yes, but my response to this always was, okay, yes.
Let's get somewhere without a map, fool.
Right, exactly. It's like the map is not the territory, but try going, navigating the woods. It's like, yes, obviously the map is not the territory, but it is but basically once you have all that, then you know where you have a GPS. It's like, you know where you are. You know that if you have a vision of Mercury, you know that you're in Hod. You know that if you have a vision that pertains to like information and intelligence and all of this stuff, and there's mercurial imagery and all this, and that's Hod. Okay, that goes there. And you know that if you have some vision that is about lions devouring you or something like that, well, then you know where you are. It's like strength Leo, or maybe somewhere else, because there's some things phase in and out. And then of course, then once the tree is mastered, you've got 30, you basically got 32 drawers, right? You've got to fight instead of this mess. And by the way, here's another reason why this is so important, right? You can see this in the culture about people who don't have I'm going to make a really fucking base point right now. So basically what you're doing is you're cleaning up your internal.
Yeah.
Right. And you're making sense of it and ordering it. And you're making order out of chaos.
Yeah.
Right. So you're cleaning your room, and you can see people in the culture who don't have this sorted out, because you'll see people like Jordan Peterson or any other person who talks about Jungian shit. And then once you know stuff, you'll just hear these people and they're spewing shit out of their mouth. They're just like, oh, well, like the great Jungian significance of the star is related to, it's like, and they're just like saying words. You're like, actually, no, you don't know what you're talking about. And it's actually really important because, earlier in the previous call, we were talking about the 4 worlds of the Kabbalah. So Asaya, Yetzirah, Bria, Absolute. So you understand different levels of correspondence and how ultimately these things are ultimately empty. So you understand that, for instance, immediately, or if you're talking about a symbol in Tefereth, that you're like, yes, that's Tefereth, but it's not ultimate truth. You automatically understand that there's all the other stages above that, right, where other people don't. They just get some vision and they're like, that's God. I know the truth. It's
and I was there. I was there at that point. Because I was, you're an atheist, and then you have this like Tefereth vision, and to you, that's God. You just saw God, But now I have and it's interesting that you're really helping me here, pull this together, or at least to validate some ideas that I had internally.
This is critical for everyone, by the way. This work that we're talking about right now is as fundamental to the early stages as meditation. It really is.
Yeah.
And think about it this way, right? And this will appeal to you. You've got meditation, which is a brute force way of calming your mind.
Yeah.
And then you've got Kabbalah, which is a way of ordering all the other shit in it so that it's at least filed away and clean so that you can meditate cleanly.
Right.
Right. So.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. And one of the most interesting things to me, one of the most interesting points or realizations that I had once I started to study Kabbalah, I kind of internally, intuitively understood that the vision I had was related to Tifereth. And
by the way, I'm not necessarily sure it is related.
I know. No, yeah. Don't worry, Jason. I won't hold you to it.
Okay. I would say Leo. Well, here's why it's related to Tifereth, by the way. So here's an example of Kabbalah. What you can do is, right. The reason that it's related to Leo is obvious.
Yeah.
Right. So then you get the strength card. The reason that is related to Tifereth is because the lion is often used as a symbol of Christ, which is a symbol of Tifereth, which is a symbol of the sun, and which is a symbol of the ego.
I was also bathed in pure, unconditional love, and it was made clear to me that the sins of humanity were entirely forgiven as a foregone conclusion.
So there you go, right?
Right, yeah.
Okay, so now, by the way, I just want to call your attention to, and I'm not cutting you off.
No,
I'm just calling your attention to the fact that notice how I just responded to that. It's like, oh, it's this. Yeah, that's that. Okay, great. Now, and that doesn't diminish it. It means it's absolutely critical. But you notice I'm like, okay, that goes there. That's great. And then there's all this other stuff. Now compare that to somebody without any of that training, just experiencing that, suddenly being like, I saw Jesus.
No, that's exactly where I was.
I need to become a senator.
No, that's exactly where I was. And, since I didn't have any tool belt whatsoever, this kind of hit me. And, my ego almost immediately just expanded to the size of the universe and, really tried to claim all of this. And for a long time, I'm incredibly grateful that I have a lot of friends who had already put in 20 years down a Zen path or something, that were around me, and other individuals began to show up in my life. I was led to fairly shortly thereafter, and that really, really helped. Doesn't mean that I didn't chase after that shit, for a year and almost kill myself and all the kinds of usual stuff. But
what you're saying, these also are archetypal experiences, right? That's what happens at Tifereth when you contact Tifereth. And by the way, contacting Tifereth also does not mean that you have the grade of Tifereth, because you don't get the grade until you stabilize that as base awareness.
Yeah, no, it was completely unstable.
And hence, this is why magic is a great work instead of, because otherwise you could just give someone a vision of Kether and then they'd be done. It's like, if only, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
So the ego expansion, like I went through all this as well. So that Tifereth, the sun, the lion, all of these are related to the ego. These are all symbols of the ego and the sun, which is, again, we have association chains. So the danger of Tifereth, I think there's actually a term for it, but I forget, is basically you get this huge ego expansion. And that's the point at which, and by the way, Tifereth is the highest goal of most human beings spiritually. And prior to only recently, it was the highest that most, at least Western initiates, were able to attain.
Yeah.
Now it's changed because we're in a different time period. And so people are all obsessed with crossing the abyss and stuff like that, often prior to the hitting Tifereth. So, but the ego expansion of Tifereth is what Tifereth does, right? Because you're touching the transcendent ego. And there is always the expansion followed by contacting reality. And this is where everyone hits, where they decide they're the Messiah, where they decide, they got to start a cult.
All the shit, man.
Because by the way, what's the sphere after Tifereth, right?
That's Doth.
Well, in the middle pillar, but numerically, what's the sphere after Tifereth?
What was that?
so along the serpent path, which means climbing the tree in a zigzag fashion, the after Tiferet, the next step is Geburah 5, which is warfare, violence, and aggression.
Oh, fuck me.
So think about this, right? Just not to pick on one religion because it happens to everyone, but everyone said, oh, let's say Christianity, right? Okay, well, Christ, well, then followed by the church militant, right? Or Muhammad becoming enlightened in a cave, followed by the imperial activity of Islam, right? It happened, yeah. and then 4, Hesed, establishing dominance in the earth, all this stuff. So if you don't know the stages, people get stuck, and that's the problem, right? And another critical example of this within our own time period is, I think you're probably old enough to. I think we're around the same age.
We are.
So we're both old enough to remember this, but other people on the call may or may not be, which is the rave years. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I'm totally serious. Right. It's like all these people were doing tons of MDMA, which is associated with the heart, right? The heart chakra. I love everyone. I love you, man. Yeah. Talking to a drug dealer you met 90 seconds previous. Right. You know, like, right? It's great. And
try loving people without drugs.
What's that?
Said try loving people without drugs.
Right, because then it's actually real, right? So, yeah. But MDMA is such a beautiful drug, right? Not that I or anyone on this call has ever done it, right? Somebody I read on the internet. It's a very beautiful drug. It has a tremendous spiritual potential, but it opens the heart. Well, so again, Kabbalah is not. By the way, Kabbalah is not just shit in a fucking Crowley book, right? It's like, oh, the heart. Well, in your life, right? It's like MDMA, obviously, Tiferet, right? Heart opening, right? And then people are having the rave years. People are having all these archetypal experiences of. The same thing happened in the 60s. The next thing that happens is, if only we can give everyone MDMA, if only we can give everyone LSD, right. If only everyone would come to the rave and experience love, all the problems in the world would end. And then what happens next? They contact reality, and it's a horrible come down. And then the drinking starts, and the burnout, and the dark side, because people they're in that state and they forget that their dark side exists. Right. And there's still work to be done. It's not just MDMA, it's any spirit. This is spiritual bypassing, right? People are constantly trying to get into altered states of consciousness to avoid their problems, right? It's like, no, that stuff has to be integrated. So the Kabbalah also is not just a series of dead look at it this way. It's more than a set of correspondences on a page. Memorizing and working with the correspondences is similar to what I was saying in the last call. Think of them as mnemonics, training wheels, and tools to allow you to understand that energy that's in your life and in the world and always has been and always will be, because it's part of human existence. All humans all go through these stages, right? Yeah. And the world does. So.
No, I'm definitely seeing now because before when I've read through 777 and I've touched it a few times, I've just been like, I don't want to memorize. Who came up with this shit? Is this worth memorizing? But now that you're sort of putting it into context, I can see how immensely valuable this would be for this work, especially with the stage I'm at right now, where I'm really finally trying to drop out a lot of dogma, burn a lot of boats, and work on my own maps. Because, for quite a while, I didn't even have the ability to structure a map in my mind about, the experiences that I had had. And that's a really fragile and sensitive place to be. And you essentially end up having to read everybody else's stuff to try to get what fits, And then I'm finally now at a place where I'd like to begin working on my own personal maps a little bit more, because I've always been very independent, so that's far more comfortable for me. But it's been a great experience too to be had the shit knocked out of me, and it's a very humbling experience for someone who used to be or was used to being a very, very good map maker in reality on the physical plane, So I think you definitely helped me out there. Thanks.
Great. Yeah, I want to point out too. It's like when people think of the Kabbalah as a dogmatic system, it's really not, right?
No, not at all.
Because when you're working through it, it's personal to you. No one's Kabbalah is the same as anyone else's. But and again, this is all the stuff Crowley has said, and I found it to be totally true. It's like you and I can talk about, it's everyone's Kabbalah is different, but you and I can talk about the heart, love, sun, lion, understand that all these things link up, and talk about that part of human existence, and it's pretty close, right? But it means something totally different. For like your internal visions are totally different from mine, yet you can say, oh, lion made of stars. I was like, oh, well, that's Leo, and this goes to this part. But it's your vision, and it's totally personal to you, right? But so everyone builds their own Kabbalah. The floor plan is the same, but just think of it as it's not a system. It's a floor plan for building your own internal map.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, it's actually amazing that we can have this conversation at all. And the fact that using the Kabbalah as a map sort of assists in that, I think for everybody else on the call just goes to show the value of having these kinds of maps, especially when you start, broaching this territory, you're going to want a map.
And in the same way that in the prior call, Cliff was saying that where he was, and I knew exactly where he was, and I could see it manifesting in every single word that he was saying. It's like the maps are real. The initiates are all different. The internal experiences are all more or less different. It's not like this is why this isn't like it's not a religion where you go and everyone has the one size. That's not nonsense. That everyone has the one size fits all. But it's like basically you give people the map, they have the experience. I know exactly where he is, and I know exactly the next steps. Right. Yeah. And that's not me. And that's not me telling him, oh, do this. It's like, okay, well, just, that's the turn off that you want to take on the next road. So,
sure. And, to that point, Jason, as soon as you've learned enough music to play something and be happy with yourself, just drop everything and learn music theory. You'll do yourself a huge favor.
You're saying learn music theory instead of playing music?
I'm saying once you get to the point where you've done some little dinky thing and you're very pleased with yourself, stop trying to gain fundamental skills and just learn, take 3 weeks and learn music theory. Because if you do that, everything you do moving forward, you're going to progress at about 3 times the speed.
Great. That's basically where I'm at now.
Yeah. Cool.
To what extent should you learn music theory? Because I've got chord. I understand the chord scales.
You're talking circle of fifths.
Okay, I have that.
Yeah. Compositional theory.
So what is that?
Basically, how to do chord progressions.
Okay.
Basically, read music composition for dummies.
Oh, great. That's a great. Yeah. Okay.
Just get some basic compositional theory under your belt, so that you know how to do chord progression changes from one chord progression into another chord progression, and you can make it sound classical. You can make it sound very you'll just learn how to compose music in the way that composers have been doing it for hundreds of years. So that once you learn that. And if you learn that up front, rather than getting all these bad habits under your belt while your mind is still fresh and you haven't imprinted yourself, I always tell people, learn your music theory first.
Okay.
And then go and get all your technical skills under your belt. And you'll find that 3 times faster than everybody else, suddenly you're creating shit that sounds awesome. And you're very, very, and then you go from being slightly pleased with yourself because you could make something that sounds halfway decent to being extraordinarily pleased with yourself.
That's thank you for that. So thank you. I will do that. And that's literally what you just said to me is exactly what I was just saying to you about Kabbalah. It's exactly the same. It's
right.
Learn the Kabbalah. People are and it's the same. It's people look at music theory and they're what? I gotta feel the music in me, man. It's well, yes, but anyways, it's the same with Kabbalah. People look at that 777, immediately chuck it out and then make up some story about how it's not important. Right. But it's exactly the same as what you're saying.
Okay, cool. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Jason.
You're welcome.
Okay, hope you really, really enjoyed that. I will see you next time for the podcast. Don't forget to grab the Cyber Monday deals. They are only good till end of day, midnight Pacific Standard Time, Monday, Cyber Monday 2021. All right, see you there. Talk to you soon. Lots of love. Bye.